Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing well today. It's been almost 2 weeks since I sat on the porch and recorded a message. But I've been out of town. Took some vacation time and spent 6 nights in Colorado, 6 days and nights, and then one night in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then went to Lubbock and spent a night. And Lubbock is where I'm from, where I was born and lived the first 10 and a half years of my life. But I had not been back there for 43 years. And it was really amazing going back and going by the house that I grew up in and seeing my elementary school. And then I had gone back there to go to tech and driving by my dorm. It just brought back a flood of memories and some emotion that I really wasn't expecting. And I guess because I hadn't really thought about the feelings that I would feel looking where I used to play and thinking about my parents when I was young. And just, I think it's important sometimes to remember where you came from so that it kind of helps you remember who you are. I think that's one of the things that Jesus was trying to do always with his disciples, is to remind them who they are and whose they are. There's a real familiar story in Matthew, and it actually picks up where our last message leaves off, when they had fed the 5,000. Remember, I had said that I felt like he was saying for us to be grateful for what we have and to trust God's power with what we had, and that we are often able to participate in the miracle of life and the benefit of others when we do that. So right after these 5,000 were fed, Jesus, remember, he had still been trying to get some time alone, and so he sent the disciples away as he was dismissing the crowd. So he sent them in a boat to go across the Sea of Galilee, and then he dismissed the crowd. And after the crowd was gone, he went up to the mountain to pray. And so he had done that and spent hours up there praying and regrouping. And then deep into the night, there was a windstorm on the Sea of Galilee. And this is not uncommon, and they usually come up very suddenly, as most storms in our life usually do. And then, so Jesus made his way down the mountain, and he made his way across the sea, headed towards the boat. Now, what we often just think in our minds is about Jesus walking on water. But the actual passage says that he was, the actual Greek word that we translate into walking, the literal translation is about treading. And then what we often translate or think of as water, it actually was the sea. So he was making his way across the sea. Now, the reason that that's a little bit significant, it is that this is not just a story about Jesus being able to walk on water. I think when we reduce it to that, then we are, we're just making kind of I don't know, what kind of tricks can Jesus do? And that was not the point at all. You see, the sea, in that culture, in that time period, they had different notions about things, and windstorms and seas they saw as being part of a cosmic power. And so if there was wind and storms at sea, then that was some sort of deity trying to work out anger or work against them. And so by Jesus being able to move across the stormy sea, what we are to get from that is that God's power is always greater than any storms we might encounter. Isn't that beautiful? So he was making his way across, but the disciples didn't recognize him. When they looked up in the boat and they saw this form, this shape moving across the stormy sea, it frightened them. And I think often, sometimes when we are in the middle of something, it's hard to recognize where our strength can come from. It's hard to recognize the power of God at work in our lives. And so naturally, they were afraid and questioning. And then one of the disciples, Peter, who often opens his mouth before thinking, said, well, if it's you, call me out. And so have me walk to you. And so Jesus says, come, as he does to all throughout the stories, to his disciples and to people. Come. You won't find where he says, worship me, but he says, come, follow me. So he called Peter, and Peter steps out of the boat. He responds, and he's making his way. In fact, it says he was about treading on water, and it uses the word water in that. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, maybe it matters to you, but it doesn't matter to me if he was treading water or if he was actually walking on the water, but he was making his way in trust towards Jesus. And then the story goes that he observed the wind. He saw the wind. Now, you can't really see wind, but you can see the damage that it's done. And so what I get from that is that he lost his focus in trust, and he started to look around at the problems and started to focus on the problems instead of where he was going. And that's when he began to sink. But Jesus pulled him out, and he chastises him a little bit. He says, "O ye of little faith." And I think it's important for us to take note of this, that not only was Jesus chastising Peter for not having faith in him, but for not having faith in himself. That is what Jesus is always trying to get across to us, is that this is a partnership. We have the strength available inside of us to be able to do what we're called to do, to be able to focus on the strength and presence of God and what that means for our own abilities, instead of the storm, instead of all of the danger, instead of what could happen to us. Now, why I think that might be an important story for us today is that this virus is still going on. And this virus has not behaved the way we had hoped that it would. You know, it didn't burn out in the summertime. In fact, here in South Texas, our numbers have increased. And so it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And if we focus too much on the destruction that the virus is causing, it can cause us to lose our strength. It can cause us to become discouraged. Now, and it's important for us to acknowledge and grieve the losses that are occurring. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You can't deny what's going on. But we have to remember that we are not a people of weakness, and we can do what we need to do to get through this together. You see, this treading about on water that Peter was doing was in collaboration with Jesus's power, with his calling to him. And so what we are called to do right now is to collaborate with one another. Now, one of the things that I noticed on my trip, and we went a lot of places. We we took a flight, so we were in a plane. We stayed at hotels, so we were around people there. But one of the things I was really appreciative of is that there were so many safety precautions put in place, and the people that were responsible for seeing that those precautions were followed were very intentional. And I considered that a very caring act on those people. Now, I know it was their job, but I felt safe in their charge. And in return, we wore our mask everywhere. And every place that we went, there was not a question if you would wear your mask or not. You wore your mask. And that was a sign and a show of respect and care for one another. And it was a beautiful thing. It really was. And even my two granddaughters, who were 6 and 8, they wore their mask. And they never even fussed about it or anything. And because of that, we were able to experience a beautiful time away together and see some things we hadn't seen before and enjoy some experiences that we hadn't experienced before. And it was real encouraging. I mean, for me, it was like going up to the mountaintop and being refreshed by God's love. So, and I know that everyone can't get away, and a lot of people are penned up and alone right now. And I had a conversation with someone this week, and she's used to being very active. And because of her age, her family is really insistent that she stay in. And so for her, the storm is very close, and it's probably hard to see that there is power available for us, that we're not alone, that there's this comfort. And so maybe that's why it's important for all of us to be mindful of one another and realize that we're all trying to tread about in this storm, but that we don't do it alone. When Jesus got into the boat in this story, the storm subsided. And I think when we work together with that power of God, when we are in alignment, and we'll receive the comfort and the strength that's available, that the storm kind of loses its power over us. And I guess that was part of my biggest refreshment this last week, is that I had let myself get bogged down not only with the storm of the virus, but of all of the swirling hate and divisiveness and all of the things that seem to be disrupting community in this country right now. And I had sort of let that be the wind that I was observing, instead of seeing that the same strength and the same love that establishes community redeems and sustains community. And I needed to kind of have a jolt of that and to be reminded of that. Now, one of the things that some of the commentaries and some of the scholars that have studied these things talk about when they talk about them witnessing, when the disciples were witnessing Jesus walking on the sea, they called it an altered state of consciousness. And for some people aren't comfortable with that sort of language, but in that time and culture, you have to sort of interpret things from the way that the early hearers would have heard it, or how they would have experienced it. And there were a lot of instances of seeing visions and having a perspective, a state, your actual relationship to reality changed in the moment. And whether we realize it or not, we do that as well. There's people that have studied this, and they say that there's probably 20 different states of consciousness, one of them being our normal, everyday understanding of our reality. Some others that we don't probably think of is that when you're sleeping and when you're dreaming, and that time that's right before you go to sleep, when you're just about to drop off, you go from being completely alert and thinking about things to that sort of dreamy state right before you go to sleep. All of those are altered states of consciousness, and those are acceptable altered states of consciousness to us. But to actually see someone walking on water sounds so weird to us. But they understood it as an interruption into what they were perceiving. The storm was scaring them, and then they saw this vision, which initially scared them more, but ultimately brought them comfort and strength and peace. And so I think sometimes we need to open up our hearts a little bit more to be able to not let the wind and the noise and the destruction get our full attention, but to find ways, whether we're holed up in our house or we're able to get out, to find ways to experience that disruption to the everyday, to be able to behold something beyond our understanding. Because I think in doing that, it refreshes us to remind us that we are part of something that is enduring, part of something that will not desert us no matter what storms we go through. And no matter what changes it may bring, that we still have that same love loving us, and we still have that same calling to participate in that. And that's really the same story that you get in the scriptures over and over again. It's that things will happen in life that are disruptive. But God's love, this power that has created us, redeems us, and sustains us over and over and over again. So I hope this week, whether you are holed up in your house, whether you're working and feel like your life is pretty normal, or wherever you find yourself in the middle of this current storm, I hope that you'll have some time, whether you pray or you center yourself or you just be still. When the disciples called out, "Who is it?" And he said, don't worry, it's me. And it's the same ego eimi, I am, as what God told Moses and what Jesus said over and over again. I am the good shepherd. I am. And that same I am is today and will continue to be. God bless you, and go in peace.